What's on the session? A bit of a negative start to the week.
James, that's right. Unfortunately, it was a bit of a negative start. It does look like investors have taken a bit of a breather and we have come off some of those record highs that we were seeing last week on the market. So certainly following some of those leads from overseas markets on Friday, I do think as a result of some of those geopolitical concerns flaring up again, and of course not much detail that came out of Janet Yellen's speech, did provide a little bit of disappointment for investors, and we did see those markets falling off. So really that translated across into our market today, and unfortunately, we just couldn't see those earnings pushing our market higher. We do know that in terms of the economic data coming out this week, it will be fairly quiet. We did certainly see a fairly quiet day today. So I do think it will be these earnings coming into the last week that really will drive any strong performers on our market today. But unfortunately, we didn't see that today. That materials sector was the worst performer, as you mentioned. We really did see it being dragged higher by Orora and Western areas, but Bluescope was leading it lower. And of course, we did see that iron ore price falling off. The best performer being that energy sector. We did see it the best performer on the market last week as well. So we are continuing some of those gains. But unfortunately, as I mentioned, taking a bit of a breather today.
Just talking about potential value opportunities, as you mentioned, materials, and the miners in particular, very much weighing on the broader index. Atlas off by over 5.5%, Fortescue down 1.8%, Rio off by 1.3%. Opportunities there, considering the iron ore price that led these falls, or would you be cautious?
Oh, James, look, I'm probably a bit cautious, I suppose, in the short term, given the fact that we are continuing to see this iron ore price falling off. I think we've seen it hit around $90 now. I think there's some expectation out there that the long-term average will sit at around $90 or so. We're probably a little bit more optimistic in terms of that iron ore price eventually recovering back up to an average price of around $100 US. So I do think in terms of some of the economic data that's coming out of China, it's providing a little bit of nervousness for investors in terms of the economy over there. And obviously when we did see some of that data last week missing estimates, we did see that iron ore price continuing to fall off. So I think we are definitely feeding off that, and I think there is probably a bit of cautiousness around from investors in terms of the growth outlook for the Chinese economy. So I do think that's certainly weighing on that iron ore price, certainly weighing on our stocks over here, those iron ore stocks. So long term, we do certainly see value in those stocks such as Rio and certainly Fortescue. As we've spoken about quite extensively before, we do actually very much like the underlying fundamentals for Fortescue, particularly after that very strong result that it came through with last week. So really confirmed our positive outlook, and it is a high conviction buy of ours at the moment. But I do think in the short term, probably a little bit of cautiousness should be taken in terms of that iron ore price, but definitely medium to long term, we do remain optimistic on some of those stocks.
Leanne, at the other end of the spectrum in terms of sectoral performance today was the energy plays. We saw Caltex have an absolute belter on session. It was up about 7.5%. Look, was it purely the report that did it today, or was there something more to it?
It did look like the numbers that came through, James, were pretty strong. It was at the upper end of their guidance range and slightly ahead of forecast, so that certainly added to it as well. But in terms of their Kernel refinery as well, they provided a bit of an update there, sort of saying that it is on track and on budget, still for closure around October 2014. And of course, they did announce some of those cost and efficiency review as well as a result of that Kernel refinery coming to a closure. So I do think there was a bit of optimism in terms of what was announced today in looking at those numbers coming in ahead of forecast. So I do think that investors certainly reacted to that today. I think one of the negatives that did come out of the result, however, was in terms of their net debt. We actually saw that increasing by 11.5%. But overall, as I said, those numbers did look pretty strong. Looking at the outlook, we do know that probably Australia's refinery industry has been coming under a little bit of pressure in terms of some of those larger new facilities kind of coming on board in other places such as India, which obviously has been flooding the market with, cheap fuel. So that's certainly been putting stocks such as Caltex under quite a significant amount of pressure. So certainly in the short term, we do remain pretty cautious on the outlook for the stock. But once the Kernel refinery does come to a closure, we do actually think that the stock may potentially be re-rated, and we may in fact see that earnings multiple multiple being sort of increased as it transforms from sort of an energy or resources company more to an infrastructure company with higher PE multiples. So that's only likely to come potentially further down the track, sort of FY15 and beyond, once that Kurnell refinery does close, as I mentioned. So long term, we probably are a little bit more optimistic, but certainly short term, we do remain cautious on this one.
Orora, one of the best performers. Your thoughts on the results?
James, another top performer. Of course, we know it was the first standalone result that came through for the company since its demerger with Amcor, and it certainly was a strong result. And again, it did come in ahead of expectations. Again, this one had quite a strong run leading up to the result, and certainly we did see investors being rewarded with it today. There's net profits up 45%. That was about 4% ahead of our forecast. Those operating cash flows really were the standout, though. They were up about 33%, and really now we think that probably puts the company in quite a good position in terms of growth going forward and potential capital management initiatives as well. And of course, we also saw some pretty good cost savings coming through, about $27 million or so, and really that drove some of that growth as well. Looking at their outlook, there wasn't too much quantitative guidance in terms of their outlook, but they have said that they will continue those cost reduction initiatives, and they are expecting their earnings coming into the next year to be an improvement on their pro forma result in 2014. So definitely those numbers today looked strong. Their outlook guidance did remain pretty strong. And again, we do quite like the outlook on this stock, particularly given that strong earnings momentum, that attractive cash flow profile, and potentially shareholder returns, as I mentioned, in the form of potential growth or capital management initiatives. So again, it's sort of confirmed our positive view on this stock.
Hope for a bit of a bounce back yesterday after what, down almost 13%.
Oh, look, potentially. You mean Bluescope?
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely could potentially see a bit of a bounce back. I do agree with Mike that I think it was overdone today. It was an overreaction. If we look at, it did miss some earnings estimates. It was about 7.4 below earnings estimates, but really not a huge miss. And obviously, in terms of that outlook commentary, didn't look too good. But being the worst performer today, I do think it was probably an overreaction and potentially could see a little bit of a bounce back. It really was the opposite scenario to Orora. We did see quite a good strong run up in this one leading up to the result as well. Unfortunately, investors weren't rewarded today, and we did see that stock price really being hit. So I do agree it's probably quite highly leveraged to any recovery in that housing market, and that potentially could provide some upside. But I think there probably is still a little bit of uncertainty in that housing market, and again, that could put a little bit of pressure in the short term. But I do think we potentially could see a bit of a bounce back after today's performance.